The sky tore open without warning, Dot. It didn't come with thunder or lightning. It didn't howl or crack. It simply split like silk sliced by a blade of light. The clouds parted above the city skyline, and from that jagged seam spilled a river of gold. It shimmered and danced across the glass and steel of New Haven like sunlight through stained glass. Cars screeched halts in the intersections below. Coffee cups shattered on sidewalks. A murmured curse fell from someone's lips. Then silence spread like a blanket. Even the birds forgot how to fly. Micah Voss looked up from behind the counter of a second-hand bookstore wedged between a crumbling church and a noodle shop. He'd been reorganizing a stack of forgotten poetry collections, most of which hadn't been touched in a decade. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about loss, or about the heart monitor that had flatlined beneath his hands, or about the letter from the hospital board that told him he was too emotionally compromised to continue. No, for the first time in weeks, he was thinking about light. A golden form descended from the rift. She didn't fall. She floated graceful, deliberate. Her wings shimmered like molten dawn, spanning wider than any earthly thing had a right to. Her feet were bare, and as she came lower, it became clear she wasn't just glowing. She was made of it. Her hair, a cascade of starlit silver, drifted around her as if the wind itself bowed in reverence. Her skin was luminescent, but soft, not harsh or blinding like artificial light. And her eyes were impossible. Twin galaxies swirled in those orbs, deep and endless, full of motion and memory and mourning. People dropped to their knees. Some sobbed. Others raised trembling phones, trying to capture the moment through cracked screens. A man gasped and muttered, "Angel," as if naming her could make her real. Someone else whispered prayers, fingers fumbling for crosses or beads or meaning. But she didn't look at them, Dot. Micah stood still. No kneeling. No filming. Just watching Dot, and then, without thinking, he said it. "You look like peace incarnate." The words left him like breath in the cold. He hadn't planned them. Hadn't even meant to speak. But the ache in his chest, the hollow he'd been carrying since that night in the ache impelled the truth from his lips, and she heard it. Her head turned slowly, the way gravity draws a leaf to water. Her gaze cut through the silence, through the crowd, through time itself, and settled on him. For a moment, the golden light around her dimmed, just slightly, just enough to see her blink. Micah froze. She began to walk. Not float, walk, her wings tucked behind her, folding like sun-drenched silk. Each step left no mark on the sidewalk, no sound in the air. The crowd parted instinctively. No one dared move, yet she moved through them like a wave. Then she stood before him. Micah's breath hitched. His chest rose once, twice, but no words followed. Her eyes bore into his soul, not harshly, not with judgment, but with recognition. As if she knew him. As if she'd always known him. "You saw me," she said. The words were soft, but they echoed through his bones like cathedral bells. He didn't nod, didn't smile. Just stood there, heart thundering in the cavern of his chest, as the woman of light and galaxies tilted her head, and just for a moment smiled back. And somewhere far above them, in the broken sky, something ancient stirred. The night air was unusually still, as if the city itself held its breath. Traffic had resumed. News anchors were scrambling. Social media burned with speculation and conspiracy. But in the quiet of Micah Voss's apartment, nestled on the third floor above the bookstore, everything felt suspended like reality hadn't quite resumed. He sat on the edge of his bed, still wearing the same flannel shirt he'd had on, when she looked at him. He hadn't spoken since, not to anyone, not even to himself. Words felt inadequate, cheap things compared to what had happened beneath that torn sky. He had watched an angel descend, and she had walked through hundreds to stand in front of him. And then she'd spoken. Not to the masses, not to the kneeling, but to him. "You saw me." Micah let out a breath, slow and trembling. He hadn't been drinking. He hadn't hit his head. She was real. He could still see her eyes. He stood and walked toward the window. New Haven's skyline glowed softly beyond the glass, smeared with the golden remnants of what had come earlier. He rested his forehead against the cool pane, fingers twitching. With a tension he couldn't name, that's when he saw her again. She stood in the alley behind the bookstore, bathed in moonlight, as if the sky had poured its silver down just for her. No wings now, no blinding radiance, just a woman in a pale, sleeveless dress that shimmered faintly against the darkness. Her hair flowed freely, the same impossible silver, and her hands were folded in front of her. Micah's pulse roared. He blinked once. She was still there. He opened the window, leaned out, and whispered, "You're real." Her gaze lifted, calm and unwavering. "May I come in?" There was no fear in her voice. No command, only stillness. Micah swallowed, hard and nodded. Front door, 3rd floor? By the time he opened it, she was already there. They stood in silence for a moment. The hallway light flickered above them, casting shadows across her face, softening the impossible sharpness of her features. But it was her eyes that gripped him again, vast and ancient, shimmering with sadness. And something else, something like vulnerability. "I'm not supposed to be here," she said quietly, stepping inside. Micah closed the door gently. "Then why are you?" She walked past him, barefoot on the wooden floor, and stopped beside the cluttered shelf lined with medical books and battered fantasy novels. She touched the spine of one gently, like it might crumble beneath her fingers. Her voice, when it came, was softer than before. "Because you said something that I wasn't prepared to hear." Micah frowned. "I only said you looked like peace." She turned to him, and something behind her eyes cracked open just a little. "No one's ever said that to me. Not in all the eons I've existed." He laughed, nervous and awkward. "Well, I say weird things under stress. You didn't say it for them," she said. "You said it for me." Micah shifted, unsure of what to do with his hands. "You make it sound like I cast some sort of spell." "In a way you did." Before he could speak again, she stepped closer. Her fingers reached out, brushing against the back of his hand. The moment they touched, the air shifted warm and charged, like standing beneath a thunderstorm that hadn't yet broken. A pulse surged through him, golden and burning and strange. He gasped and staggered back, gripping his chest. What was that?" She stared at his wrist, eyes wide. On his skin, just beneath the sleeve, a faint golden mark began to appear. A swirling, delicate pattern glowing ancient. "The bond," she whispered, horror blooming in her voice. "It's real. I thought it was dormant. I thought it was gone." Micah stumbled to the couch, heart hammering. "What bond? What is happening to me?" She stepped back, as if afraid to be near him. "You're not supposed to have that. Only the descendants carry it." "Descendants of what?" She swallowed. "Of us." The words hung in the air like a blade. Micah's world tilted. The apartment faded around him. The air felt too thick to breathe. And in her eyes, he saw not fear of him, but fear. For him. "I don't even know your name," he whispered. "Cyril," she said. Then quieter. "And you've just become the most hunted man on earth." The apartment was too quiet. Micah could hear the hum of the old refrigerator in the yasse. Kitchen, the muffled screech of tires somewhere far below on the city streets. But those sounds were distant background noise to the storm building inside him. He sat hunched on the edge of the couch, his breath uneven, staring at the golden sigil still glowing faintly on his wrist. It pulsed like a heartbeat, as if something ancient had awakened inside his blood and wasn't sure whether to embrace him or devour him. The swirling lines and geometric curves of the mark were beautiful, but they didn't belong to him. He was just a man, just a bookstore clerk who used to stop people from dying. And now he was glowing. Eril stood across the room, no longer looking like the celestial being who had descended from the sky hours earlier. Her wings were gone, her radiance dimmed, but there was something in the way she watched him, half guarded, half sorrowful, that told him her power hadn't gone anywhere. She was simply hiding it, the way people sometimes hide pain behind practiced smiles. He looked up at her. What? Do you mean I'm a descendant? Of who exactly? She didn't speak right away. Instead, she turned toward the window, her silhouette catching the moonlight in that strange, soft way her body always seemed to catch the cosmos. Of the Nephilim. Micah blinked. Those are angels who fell in love with humans, right? Or fought for them? I don't remember. I only know the name from myths. Not myths, Cyril said softly. History. Banned, buried, but real. He tried to laugh, but it caught in his throat. So what you're saying, I'm the descendant of some ancient angel-human hybrid? Yes. Micah leaned back against the couch, rubbing his temples. Okay, sure, why not? The world already split open over my head today. Let's add half-divine bloodline to the list. You're not half-divine, she said, and turned back to face him. Your blood carries traces fragments. Most Nephilim faded into obscurity, hunted, erased. Those who survived passed on bloodlines in secret. Over generations, the divine essence diminished, but not entirely. Some humans still carry the spark. And you, her gaze dropped to the glowing sigil. You just ignited it. Micah looked down at his wrist again. It wasn't supposed to happen, Cyril added, more to herself than to him. I wasn't supposed to respond. I wasn't supposed to feel anything when you spoke. But you did, he said quietly. Yes, she closed her eyes. And now we're both in danger. He leaned forward. Danger from what? From them, from the thrones, the watchers, the executors. Her voice lowered. They don't allow bonds anymore. Not since the sundering. The what? She sighed, stepping closer, every movement deliberate and elegant, like gravity obeyed her out of courtesy. Long ago, Nephilim bonded with mortals freely, some for love, some for power. But those bonds disrupted the balance of realms. Some mortals tried to steal divine energy. Others became weapons. And when one bond threatened to collapse the veil between heaven and earth, the high seraphim outlawed them all. Every connection was severed. Every Nephilim hunted. And those who had bonded, her voice broke. They were erased. Micah felt his chest tighten. She sat down across from him, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. The bond between you isn't a casual link. It's ancient, sacred, rare, and once formed, it can't be undone. Micah stared at her. But I didn't do anything. You saw me, she whispered. You spoke to me like I wasn't a divine being or a phenomenon to worship, but like a person. That's the only way the bond can awaken. Through truth. Freely given. She looked up. And now, your soul is touching mine. He rubbed his face. This is insane. I know. Am I going to die? She flinched. If they find you first, yes. They will try to sever the bond. And mortals don't survive the tearing. Silence again. Outside, the moon climbed higher. The bookstore below was dark, and the city moved on, oblivious. But Micah felt like he had stepped off the edge of everything he knew. He looked at her dot. Her face was no longer unreadable. It was real now, vulnerable. Her lips parted slightly, as if bracing for whatever rejection. He might hurl next dot instead, he asked. So what happens now? Cyril blinked. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. I protect you. He laughed bitterly. You just said they'll kill me. She nodded once. Not if I burn the sky first. The air changed just after midnight. Micah felt it. Before he heard it, like the atmosphere had thickened, like invisible wires were tightening around the city's bones. The hairs on his arms rose, and the golden sigil on his wrist pulsed faster, glowing faintly through the sleeve of his hoodie. Outside, wind whipped through the alley with unnatural force. Somewhere in the distance, dogs began to bark in unison. Cyril froze. She had been pacing in the living room, her arms folded tight across her chest, like she was holding herself together with sheer will. Now she straightened, eyes narrowing as she looked toward the window. They're here. Micah stood from the couch. Who's here? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved toward the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer into the darkness. Cyril, Micah repeated, his voice low. What's coming? She turned to him, and for the first time since she'd descended from the heavens, he saw something in her eyes he hadn't expected. Fear. Executors, she said softly. Agents of the higher thrones. They're not angels. They're enforcers. They don't speak. They don't judge. They only erase. The words settled into Micah's chest like ice. And we run, he said, heading toward the door. But Cyril stepped in front of him, her hand against his chest. No, we don't run in this realm. It would only draw them in faster. She looked toward the back wall of the apartment, where moonlight pooled against cracked plaster. Her wings flared suddenly silent and swift, and she raised one glowing hand. Light spilled from her palm, carving a pattern into the air. It twisted, spiraled, then collapsed inward into a small orb. A door opened in the wall where none had existed. Micah stepped back. What the hell? The veil, Cyril said, her voice steady again. A realm between realms. We hide there. Is it safe? No, she said, but it's ours. He stared at her, at the doorway filled with shifting stars and strange liquid light. Then, without another word, he grabbed his jacket and followed her through. The moment he stepped inside, the world folded. There was no ground, no ceiling. Just a vast, shimmering space stretching infinitely in all directions. The floor beneath him was made of flowing energy blues and silvers and golds, moving like rivers. The air felt alive. Each breath tasted like static and ozone. The stars above pulsed with rhythm, like the heartbeat of something cosmic. Seril landed beside him softly. She looked more radiant here, her wings fully unfurled, their feathers burning with warm, otherworldly gold. Her hair floated slightly, as though underwater. What is this place? Micah whispered. A veil, where boundaries blur. Time doesn't hold here, nor truth. He looked down at his hands. They were glowing faintly, just like his wrist. He felt something inside him stirring a deep vibration, like something long asleep stretching in its sleep. Cyril moved ahead, and he followed. They walked across the glowing expanse, their footsteps causing gentle ripples in the fabric of the realm. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, full, charged. Have you brought others here before? He asked eventually. No, she said. Only you. Why me? She stopped walking. When she turned to face him, her eyes shimmered with something soft. Because I've watched you. For lifetimes. Micah's breath caught. What? I've seen your soul echo again and again, through different names, different bodies, but always the same kindness, the same stubborn light. She stepped closer. You don't remember me, but I remember you. I always do. He felt it then, the bond, not just a glow or a warmth. It was like a recognition, like a word on the tip of your tongue that finally surfaces. A memory, half-dreamed, snapping into place. You've been following me across lives? He whispered. She nodded. And why now? Why reveal yourself in this life? Because in all the others, she said, I watched you die before I could reach you. Micah staggered, the weight of her words hitting like a blow. I didn't come to make you choose this, she added, her voice trembling. But the moment you looked at me, and spoke not to my power, not to my title, but to me, the bond woke up. And now they're coming to sever it before it solidifies. Why does it matter to them so much? Because once fully formed, the bond can't be unmade, and it rewrites the laws they crafted. It says a mortal's love is worth more than hierarchy, that the divine can choose vulnerability, that heaven isn't infallible. Micah let that sit in the space between them. He turned slowly, staring at the swirling horizon. What happens if they catch us? They'll tear the bond from your soul. And if they don't? Cyril stepped forward, eyes glowing. Then we become something they haven't seen in 1,000 years. As she spoke, a sudden tremor shook the veil beneath their feet. From the far edges of the realm, 3 dark shapes began to descend wingless, faceless beings made of shifting shadow and iron light. Micah's pulse surged. Executors, Cyril whispered. And as the creatures surged toward them, blades of celestial fire igniting in their hands, she turned to him, her voice calm, resolute. Run if you want, but if you stay, I'll show you how to make the stars bleed. The veil screamed. It didn't use sound. It didn't need to. The scream vibrated through the light, through the groundless ground, through Micah's bones. The kind of scream you felt behind your eyes, in the folds of your soul. A harmonic collapse, a song coming undone. The executors descended like judgment, their bodies flickering with jagged tendrils of anti-light. They didn't flap wings or walk with grace. They drifted like smoke with weight, like death with purpose. Their forms shifted in and out of visibility, humanoid one moment, then serpentine, then skeletal, but always faceless, always silent. Cyril stood between them and Micah. Golden wings flared wide, her body casting long shimmering shadows across. The veil, her blade of light extended from her hand, forged not of metal, but of something older, something that remembered starlight before the stars had names. Micah backed away slowly, the glowing sigil on his wrist pulsing faster, hotter. Tell me there's a plan. They're not here for negotiation, Cyril said without turning. They've come to erase us. Quickly. How many? 3 now. More if we survive. Micah swallowed hard. Great. The first executor lunged, no prelude, no warning. It came like a glitch in reality, closing the distance between them in an impossible blink. Cyril met it with speed that defied comprehension. Her blade collided with the thing's outstretched hand, and the air split apart in a flash of golden light and black static. Micah staggered back as the explosion of force sent ripples through the veil itself. The realm trembled around them. The light beneath their feet fractured like glass, but didn't break. Seril spun, fluid and fierce, her wings catching the fractured light and turning it into fire. The executor struck again, but she was faster ducking. Low, sliding across the shimmering surface, and slashing inside. A ripple of shrieking dark shot from the wound, and the creature howled not with sound, but with a sudden collapse of space around it. Micah clenched his fists. His heartbeat thudded in sync with the sigil. He could feel her emotions in the bond. Not fear, focus, rage, sorrow. Something ancient and tightly held. Another executor broke away and turned toward him. Cyril, he shouted, but she was locked in combat, deflecting blow after blow in a flurry of light and motion. The creature came from Micah in silence, arm outstretched, a blade of frozen shadow curling from its wrist, Micah raised his hand's pointless reflex. But just before the thing struck, something inside him answered. A surge of golden light exploded. From his palms, raw, wild, UNSHAPE. The executor screamed and reeled back, its form cracking along fault lines of divine fire. Micah fell to his knees, gasping. His fingers trembled, the light still pulsing along his veins. What the hell was that? Serial turned sharply at the sound. She saw the smoldering damage on the executor, and Micah kneeling in the center of it. Your awakening, she said. What does that mean? It means your soul is waking up to what it was before. Before he could ask more, the third executor appeared behind him. It raised its blade, and then froze. Serial was there, wings flaring in fury, her blade already buried in the creature's chest. The executor dissolved into a burst of dark static, and vanished. The realm fell silent again almost. The first two executors reformed their bodies from smoke and bone, crouching at a distance, studying them. They're retreating, Micah said, breathless. No, Serial said grimly. They're recalibrating. Micah staggered to his feet, the glow on his skin starting to dim. So they just keep coming? She turned to him, wiping dark energy from her blade, her face pale beneath the light. It won't stop. Not until the bond is broken. He met her gaze, something like resolve growing in the center of his chest. Then we don't break it. Serial stared at him for a long moment, her expression, usually unreadable, cracked. Just slightly. Something like grief shone through. Don't know what that means, she said. I don't care, he replied. This isn't just about me anymore. A shiver passed through the veil. Far across the horizon, a new light appeared. Cold, harsh, controlled. A floating monolith of silver and obsidian, a structure, vast and unyielding, hovered into view, casting a long shadow across the realm. Micah turned. What is that? Serial stepped closer, her wings folding protectively around him. That, she whispered, is the Seraphim Tribunal. And for the first time, she didn't look ready to fight. She looked ready to kneel. The tribunal hovered like a judgment that had been waiting for eons. It was not a palace. It was not a temple. It was a verdict carved in stone and light, suspended above the veil like a moon that didn't orbit anything because it was the center. The structure pulsed with slow, ominous energy, crystalline veins of silver webbing. Through black monoliths, spires like blades aimed downward, as if ready to fall. Micah stood beneath it, the sigil on his wrist still glowing, but dimmer now, fragile, like a candle in wind. His body ached. Every muscle felt used, overcharged. But it wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. The bond between him and Serial hummed at the edge of every breath, and though it warmed him, it also weighed on him now, like an invisible tether tied to the stars. Serial hadn't spoken in minutes. She stared up at the tribunal with her jaw tight, her wings folded, her blade gone. She wasn't preparing for war anymore. She was preparing to be judged. Micah stepped closer. Tell me this isn't what it looks like. Her voice was low. Gets worse. Before he could answer, a soft chime echoed through the veil, and the sky beneath the tribunal opened. They were pulled upward gently, irresistibly. Micah felt weightless, his feet leaving the glowing ground, Serial beside him, her eyes burning, with something between fury and sorrow. The veil disappeared below, as the inside of the tribunal swallowed them whole. There was no floor inside, no walls, just light blinding, endless, humming with authority. It wasn't warm or cold. It just was absolute. And then the voices began. They didn't echo. They didn't speak in unison. They spoke as one, through one. A figure materialized. Before them, tall, genderless, composed of pure white flame, wings made of prismatic crystal. The face changed every time Micah blinked, old, young, familiar, alien. It was impossible to look at for more than a second without feeling like your mind might crack. Serial of the ninth fold. Her back straightened. You have broken a cord one. Communion of bond. Micah stepped forward instinctively, but Serial's arm blocked him. You have ignited the ancient tether with a mortal. Micah opened his mouth. It wasn't her fault. Silence. He staggered, his mouth locking shut. Not from fear, literally. His lips wouldn't move. Serial's eyes didn't leave the figure. Do you deny your actions? She took a long breath. No. Do you understand the consequences? Yes. Do you wish to make a statement before sentence? Serial turned her head slowly, deliberately, and looked at Micah. Her expression softened. I do. Her voice echoed now not in volume, but in clarity. It was steady. It was whole. I have lived for eons under the accord. I have followed laws I did not write, enforced judgments I did not believe in, and silenced voices I should have heard. But this soul, she gestured to Micah, this one did what no law ever could. He saw me. Micah's chest tightened. Seril stepped forward. I did not intend to form the bond, but I will not sever it. I will not erase what was freely given. Not again. Not this time. The figure pulsed brighter. Then you accept the penalty. I accept the truth. A hum filled the chamber. The bond, once ignited, may not be undone. Micah's lips unlocked. Wait, what? The voice continued. However, the mortal vessel cannot survive the completion. If the bond reaches full convergence, his soul will collapse beneath the weight of it. Serial flinched. Micah's heart stilled. What does that mean? He asked, stepping forward. What happens to me? The figure turned its burning gaze on him. You combust. You fade. You become light. Unformed and scattered. He felt the blood drain from his face. So if we let the bond complete, I die. Yes, Serial said softly, almost too softly to hear. Unless... The voice shifted. Unless the bond is severed. Will you accept disjunction? No, Micah said immediately. Serial's head snapped toward him. Micah, no. He said louder. We've run. We've fought. You've watched me die in how many lives? And I just found you. I felt you. I'm not going to throw that away because some glowing tribunal says so. Serial's voice cracked. You'll die. Micah stepped to her, took her hand, and I'll die with purpose. Not alone. Not wondering what might have been. With you. The tribunal flared. This is against all celestial law. Micah smiled bitterly. Then maybe your laws are wrong. Silence. Then the voice dimmed. So be it. The light vanished. They fell. Not like before, not gently. This time, the veil caught them like a scream. They hit the ground in a flash of gold and flame. Serial knelt, breathing hard. Micah collapsed beside her, gasping. And the bond? It flared, bright, blinding. Micah's skin lit up with threads of ancient gold, spiraling from his chest, his throat, his wrist. He screamed not from pain, but from power. The bond was completing. Seril clutched his face. Stay with me, stay. With me. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm not afraid. And then the light exploded from within him, and the world broke open again. The light shattered the sky. It wasn't a blast. It wasn't fire. It was revelation, as if the veil of the universe had been yanked back, and all creation had to witness what it had so carefully hidden for thousands of years. A golden brilliance erupted from Micah's chest, not just outward, but everywhere reaching. Across realms, into the breath of mortals, into the stillness of heaven, into the silence of the dead. The bond had completed. Micah hovered above the veil's surface, suspended like a flame that had forgotten how to die. His body was barely visible, beneath the golden radiance pulsing through him. His heart didn't beat in the traditional sense anymore. It sang a deep, ancient vibration that matched the pulse of the realm itself. Siriel stood below him. Her wings flared wide in trembling awe, her lips parted in horror and wonder. Tears streamed down her cheeks, glistening with light that wasn't hers. She had always known this moment would come if the bond solidified. She had seen it in Forbidden's archives, heard it whispered in the ruins of broken Nephilim temples. If the mortal chooses, he will burn. If he burns, he will become. But she had never expected this. Micah descended slowly, the glow dimming just enough to reveal his face. His eyes, once a quiet, earthy brown, now shimmered with starlight constellations spun in their depths. His skin still bore the human imperfections of who he'd been, but now wrapped in threads of divine gold, stitched into something new. She ran to him and caught him as he collapsed into her arms. He was still breathing. Still real. Still Micah. But different? Micah? She whispered, her voice shaking. Are you still you? He looked up at her with a smile that was unmistakably his. I think I'm more me than I've ever been. Relief broke through her like the first sunlight after a storm. She pulled him close, her fingers tangled in his hair, her forehead pressed against his. Their bond thrummed between them, no longer a fragile thread, but a woven bridge of energy, tethered to the very breath of the veil itself. All around them, the veil shifted. The damage was healing. The fractures in the fabric of reality were smoothing out. Color returned vibrant, pulsing with life. It was as though the realm itself had accepted their bond, and now it bent toward harmony instead of collapse. The tribunal didn't return. It didn't need to. Micah and Siriel were beyond their reach now. They had rewritten the law. Time passed differently in the veil. Minutes felt like hours. Hours like lifetimes. But at some point, be it a moment or an eternity, Micah stood again, taller now. Not in height, but in bearing. Siriel took his hand, and when they touched, a new pulse rippled out from their joined palms. They turned toward the heart of the veil, and there, growing where the light had once ruptured, was something unexpected. A garden. It shouldn't have existed. Nothing had ever grown in the veil before. But now, wildflowers bloomed across the once barren expanse. Trees shimmered with translucent leaves. Streams of golden light meandered through crystalline rock. And standing in the middle of it all was a child. She couldn't have been more than 6. Her hair was silver, like Siriel's. Her eyes were bright gold, like the threads that pulsed in Micah's veins. She turned as they approached, her face calm, wise beyond comprehension. Micah felt his breath hitch. Is she? Siriel nodded slowly. The bond creates what we became. Shaped her. The child walked to them, bare feet gliding over the light-touched grass. She looked up at Siriel and Micah with a soft smile. My name is Ilarith, she said, and I'm here to help protect this place. Micah knelt in front of her. You're part of us. I know, she said gently. I carry both your songs. Siriel's throat tightened, her hands trembling. Ilarith reached out and took both of their hands. As she did, a final surge of light rippled through the veil, anchoring the garden, sealing the fracture, and tethering their family to the heart of what once was chaos. The war was over. The tribunal did not return. No more executors came. The veil stood, golden and alive. And at its center stood 3 figures hand in hand, bound not by law or blood, but by choice, sacrifice, and a love that dared to challenge eternity. And the skies, once torn and silent, now sang.